The Premier League is back, so that means FPL is back. You might have seen my girlfriend's Game Week 1 team, so now it's time to look at mine. If you fancy joining my YouTube league, then you can join with the code on the screen or by clicking the link in the description. Right, let's have a look. So starting with goalkeepers. So I've gone for Pickford as my first choice keeper. Might be thinking that's a slightly weird choice. Currently 14% owned. Obviously Everton were very nearly relegated last season. But the reason I've gone for him is firstly the 4.5 million price point. I don't really like to spend too much of my budget on goalkeepers. So that was the first factor. Then the fixtures. I mean, if you look at the first 8 fixtures, there's only Arsenal that's a really tough game for Everton. I'd expect that Dyche is going to make them a much more defensive team this season and really try and shore up the back, and that can only be a good thing for Pickford. He was also in the top 3 for saves last season, so there's a lot of potential for bonus points too. My reserve keeper, I've picked Turner. I think he's going to be a very popular choice as a £4 million keeper. Obviously he's got an Arsenal kit here, but he's just signed for Nottingham Forest. And there's obviously talk of Dean Henderson joining Forest as well, but I think for the first few games, Matt Turner should be a safe choice. Now, I wouldn't really be expecting to put him into play, but if I ever do want to rotate him, there's a couple of okay-ish fixtures in the first sort of 10 games. I really doubt that I'd pick him, but you know, but he's my £4 million keeper. Moving on to defence, so I've decided to play 3 at the back for game week 1. Firstly, I've gone with Estepunan. Now, obviously, he was a brilliant asset in FPL last year. He's 53% owned, so he's going to be a very popular choice. He's £5 million. I don't think that's too bad for an attacking defender, one that's going to get returns. He scored 1 goal and got 7 assists last year in 31 starts, which is a pretty good ratio. Brighton have a very good first few fixtures: Luton, Wolves, West Ham. The fixtures do turn sour from game week 4, so I've got the option of either moving him on or benching him. My second starting defender is Gabriel. Arsenal have one of the best opening runs of fixtures in the league, I think. United and Spurs are still games I expect them to be winning. All of the other fixtures, I think there's good clean sheet potential here. Gabriel does like to pop up with a goal or an assist here and there. I did consider going for Saliba. His ownership's a lot lower and he actually has a higher points per match. I think it was very noticeable when Saliba was out and it had its effect on the rest of the defence, so I think he's actually the key defender. But the thing that's put me off of it again is just how high Gabriel's ownership is. If he scores or gets an assist and Saliba doesn't in those first few games, then I'm already losing points, so I've had to go with a popular choice here. And my third starting choice in defence is Ben Chilwell. When fit, he's an absolutely brilliant asset to have in FPL. He gets assists, he's attacking. Obviously Pochettino's come in now and Chilwell's been playing very advanced, probably more so than Reece James, which is why I've gone for Chilwell. The ownership's pretty low, so he might be a nice differential. And I think other than Liverpool, they're pretty good fixtures until Arsenal in game week 9, so he's a player I could probably hold on to if he doesn't break, because he is made of glass. And then my 2 backup defenders I've got at the moment, so I've got Henry of Brentford. It says he's got a knock. I don't think that's anything serious. I think he'll be playing. Brentford are generally quite tight at the back. They have lost Raya in goal, so that may affect their defence. But I think as a bench option, he's pretty solid. Not bad opening fixtures either. And then my last defensive choice is Kabore of Luton. He's on loan from Man City. He goes in as my £4 million choice just to spread budget elsewhere into the squad. He is an attacking fullback from what I understand, so if I ever do find myself backed into a corner where I need to play him, I wouldn't mind it doing in some of these middle fixtures. So moving on to the midfield, Mo Salah is my first choice. I think 25% ownership must be the lowest he's ever been owned in this game, or at least for a good few years. Obviously he's £12.5 million, he's the most expensive midfielder, but he did score the most points last season, which is a regular occurrence for Salah in the entire game. And in what was a very average season for Liverpool, he still managed 19 goals and 13 assists. He's still a monster. He's looking really fit in pre-season. There's been some talk about him maybe being pushed out onto the wing a little bit more. I don't think that really matters. He scores, he assists, he's a proven asset. I also think, despite the fact that we're not sure how he's going to do in that Chelsea game, I can't turn down Bournemouth in the second game. I know he blanked against Bournemouth in their, 7-0, 9-0 last season, but I still fancied to have him in there, and I imagine a few people might be flapping to get him in if the likes of Rashford or Martinelli don't do so well in the first couple of weeks. And then Newcastle onwards, these are really good fixtures. Spurs, I'd still fancy Salah to score against. No real tough fixture until City, and even then the fixtures are pretty good afterwards, so if he gets off to a good start, I can imagine myself holding on to him. If not, I've got 12.5 million, which gives me budget and flex to move and downgrade to other players. That's the main appeal for me with Salah, is that I've actually got a lot of flex by going in for the most expensive asset. Second choice is Rashford. Now, this is actually the midfielder, weirdly, that I'm the most unsure about. He's 48% owned. That is actually a big reason why I've got him at the start. I don't actually love the look of the opening fixtures. Wolves and Forest, yeah. Spurs Arsenal, Brighton, Palace, Brentford. I think they're all teams that are going to give United a really good game. The other thing is United have signed a striker now, so Holland has joined. I think Rashford would be safe in that forward position for the time being for the first few games. Once they decide to start bringing Holland in, I imagine Rashford's going to end up out on the wing again, and he does score an assist less in that position than he does up front, which is a shame because he had an absolutely brilliant season last year, but I do think he's going to regress a little bit. But that said, I still think I need some United attack in there, at least early, so that's why Rashford's got in. Third choice, Aberrieze. Now, if you've watched my other YouTube videos, then you'll know I absolutely rave about him. He had a brilliant end to the season, got 10 goals and 5 assists. With Zaha moving on from Palace, Easy's going to be the main man now. He's been brilliant in pre-season. He scored 5 or 6 goals. He's looking really fit, really up for it. And yeah, I think all of the play's going to run through him. I'm really expecting him to have a good season, so I think he's a really good choice. The only thing that I was a little bit unsure on about is Palace playing Arsenal in the second fixture. Easy doesn't tend to score against the bigger teams, at least not yet. And I'd expect Arsenal to be winning this one. That's why I've got some flex in my budget. I've got $500,000 left in this team. And I've also got options on the bench if I decide I don't want to play him for that match. Sheffield United, Brentford, Wolves, Villa, Fulham. We'll get a good idea of if he's actually carried on that form from last season, and then I can make a choice after that. Saka was a mainstay in my team last year. Again, Arsenal have got great opening fixtures. He's a real no-brainer for me. 58% owned as well. I think also with the extra players that Arsenal have brought in midfield, there's some doubts around Martinelli's minutes, where Trossard fits in, where Havertz fits in. But Saka is nailed and he's on penalties, so I think he's a good solid choice. Now, probably my most rogue choice in midfield is Diaby. And so the reason I've got Diaby is I've been really strongly contemplating having Watkins at his price point, the best striker that you could get. The issue I was finding with Watkins is if I had him, I had no money left over and I didn't have anyone on the bench that could actually come in if somebody gets injured. So I needed to free up money a little bit. So by going for Diaby instead, I've saved $1.5 million over Watkins. Diaby is a really exciting player. He scored 2 goals in the last few weeks in pre-season. He's also been playing as a second forward alongside Watkins, so I'd expect him to still be chipped in with the goals as well. I think this just gives me a route into the Villa attack until we know a little bit more. If I decide I want to move to Watkins later, then that's fine. He's also 6.6% owned right now, so if he does start well, then he's a really nice differential to have. Again, the fixtures aren't too bad. Obviously Liverpool, Chelsea, I don't mind that too much given the form that Villa have had over the last half a season. And moving on to forwards, so João Pedro is a result of exactly what I've just discussed. So Watkins out, who do I bring in as my second striker? I did consider going 4-5-1 and not having actually a second playing striker. I do quite like the look of João Pedro. He's only $5.5 million. Brighton spent a decent amount of money on him, so despite what Twitter says, I do actually think he's going to get played regularly. He's going to get some minutes, at least for these opening few games, which again, really promising opening fixtures. After game week 3, it doesn't look quite so attractive, but I could move him on by then if I wanted to, especially if I carry 2 transfers over. And my last starting player is Haaland, of course. You have to have him. He's 87% owned, which is insane. £14 million, but you know what you're going to get with him. Even when he goes in sort of slightly drier spells, I think it's something like his last 6 games he's not scored. Just his explosiveness and the ability that he could literally score a hat-trick against anyone. You have to have him. 7.8 points per match, which is crazy. I've captained him because they're playing Burnley away. I strongly considered captaining Saka, but the problem is the first match of the season is tonight, which is Burnley v City. And if Haaland goes and scores a hat-trick or a brace in that match, then you've kind of ended your weekend before it's even started. So I think I'm going to save the brave captaincy choices for another week. And finally, the final player in the squad, I've got Mabama of West Ham. Now, he's 18 years old. He's not really featured in the league yet, but he's been getting a lot of minutes in pre-season. He scored 2 goals as well. And I think West Ham, they've moved on to Scamacca. Antonio's getting on a little bit. So West Ham do need another striker to come through. I do think there's a real possibility that Mabama's going to get minutes. It might be as a sub at first, but that's fine because I'm not going to be playing him. But if he does become a viable option, then great. I've got a starting striker or a striker that's going to get some good minutes for £4.5 million. So I think he's worth owning. As I said, this squad leaves me with £500,000. I think for me right now, I've just made sure that I can get anywhere. With Salah, 12.5 million, if he's not working out, I can move to virtually any player. If a good striker pops up, I could use 2 subs, get rid of Salah, get rid of Pedro or Mabama. I think the biggest choices I wasn't sure on is whether I go with Watkins or not. And this will probably come back to bite me, but I don't think Watkins will score enough in individual games for me to be too far behind without him. So I think it's a risk worth taking. Right, so that wraps up my Game Week 1 team. What do you reckon? Are there any players I've missed? What are your teams looking like? Let me know in the comments. If you've enjoyed the content, please consider liking and subscribing. And I'll see you next week when I've inevitably had an absolutely terrible Game Week 1. See you next time.